Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Well, I thought I would mix this one in while I'm waiting for some of your new aliens and UFO suggestions. I was actually saving this story for a little bit. I read this a couple of weeks back, and so I thought to myself, why not? This will be a good time to be able to showcase it here. It's a pretty frightful encounter with something that was found there in the woods/area of North Carolina. It's hard to say exactly what it is. Is it a cryptid? Is it a skinwalker? Is it a ghost? Who knows? But as far as reading this information, I'd love to hear what your comments are on this afterwards. But pretty interesting stuff nonetheless. It's scary stuff too, considering that this is the kind of stuff that's apparently out there in the woods. But it comes from a user that's anonymous. In fact, the entry itself comes from a website called phantomsandmonsters.com, and it's basically their encounter. It's her and her boyfriend's encounter with this strange entity, whatever it was, out there in the woods. So let's go ahead and let's share this information here, and then as always, I'll give my own comments on it afterward. So here's what they stated. This happened to me in January of 2019 in western North Carolina around the small town of Silva. I was participating in a week-long program to get certified as a first responder for wilderness first aid and rescue. I'm studying to become a forester, and it is important to know how to keep people alive in the woods when things go wrong. Now, there are two primary locations in the complex: a classroom with some bathrooms and a kitchen where we spent most of the day in class and then also ate meals. There's also a group of one-room cabins on top of a steep hill directly north of the classroom where we would sleep. And an important thing to note about the cabins is the heating system. Each cabin has a small but powerful radiator in it that makes the cabin feel like a sauna if left on for too long. Since it was January in the Appalachians, it was pretty chilly outside at night, so the heat was needed. But in order to strike a balance between boiling in our beds and getting hypothermia, we would turn on the radiator and then leave a window open so that warm and cold air could circulate and create a reasonable temperature. The radiator and the open window were at the front of the cabin next to the door, and my bed was directly across from the window. Now, this incident happened on the fifth day, a Thursday, of my time there. My boyfriend and I, who was also enrolled in the program with me, had settled down for the night in the cabin we shared with one other person. We had gone to sleep as normal, and we were sleeping soundly on two bunks that we had pushed together so we could sleep next to each other. Now, sometime during the night, I was woken up by some of the shuffling on the other side of the room near the window. I heard my boyfriend say in a complaining voice, "Can't we close this window? I wake up feeling frozen." And so I woke up more and sat up in my bed groggily, about to answer him, when I heard another voice say, "If we close the window, it'll get too hot and we'll wake up sweaty." I snapped awake and froze where I was sitting. That voice had responded in my voice. There is something very strange and wrong in hearing your voice repeated back to you. In the dark, I looked down next to me to where I saw my boyfriend sleeping soundly. At this point, a mortal dread had a tight grip on my chest, and I forced myself to not move or even blink. I was focused intently on the place near the window, fearfully anticipating more of my own words. I heard more shuffling outside the window, and my same words were repeated. "If we close the window, it'll get too hot and we'll wake up sweaty," followed quickly by my boyfriend's voice again. "Can't we close this window? I wake up feeling frozen." Now, towards the end of that last repetition of my boyfriend's words, there seemed to be an unevenness in the enunciation, almost like a raising and lowering of the pitch slightly. And so I remained frozen in my bed, feeling my hand fall asleep in my propped up position. I sat there for what felt like 15 or 20 minutes, listening to whatever it was shuffling around in front of our windows, separated from me by some odd 10 feet and then a window mesh. Eventually, the shuffling became more frequent, and a weird, mumbling sound came from outside the window with no real words being said or none that I could make out. This particular behavior didn't last long before the shuffling sound moved to the left of the window to the door, where a scratching sound now began to manifest. As the sound moved, I saw the silhouette of a medium height, about maybe 5 feet 6 inch figure that moved in an uncanny way, kind of like when a baby animal tries to walk for the first time but isn't strong enough to stand up correctly. It sounded like someone was scraping some dry sticks against the wood of the door, not aggressively, but kind of like an impatient dog asking to be let in. This scratching slowly moved around the cabin, stopping when it reached the wall that I was closest to. My ears were strained to hear anything that might indicate further action, but all I could hear were footsteps on the dry leaves. The footsteps eventually moved away from the cabin and down to the other side of the hill, and they didn't return for the rest of the night. Now I stayed unmoving from my position for at least another half hour before my body readjusted itself slightly, letting blood flow back into my sleeping limbs. I was wide awake until my boyfriend's and the other roommates' alarms went off just some time before dawn to get ready for the day, which was probably around 2 hours or so, but I couldn't be certain because I didn't have a clock. My boyfriend was surprised that I was awake before him, as I am typically a late sleeper, but I just told him his alarm woke me up and then tried to act somewhat normally. We got up and got ready for our day, but I refused to leave the cabin until the sun began to peek over the mountains. Now, for the rest of the week, I was on the edge and felt like there were eyes on me wherever it was relatively dark out, though I'm not sure how much of that was just raw paranoia. In the following days of the incident, especially at night, I had realized that the lines that were repeated to me by the voice were actually a part of a conversation that my boyfriend and I had earlier in the week. And I came to the conclusion that whatever it was had been outside our cabin and heard us talking. This scared me a great deal, as I also realized that it had likely been lurking there in the following nights as well without us realizing it, and might do so again for our remaining nights, though it ended up not coming back. I waited to tell my boyfriend about this until we had left the program because he scares easily and was already a little wary of walking in the woods at night up to the cabins. It should be noted that I know this to not be a sleep paralysis experience, as I have had them before and they were nothing like this. Not to mention that I was able to move this go around. I'm asking for advice in addition to getting it off my chest, as this winter I will have to return to the same location to renew my certification. It expires 2 years after acquisition, and I want to know as much as I can so I can hopefully avoid another encounter. If there is an entity that exists in my area, I'll be glad to hear about it and what I can do, if anything, to avoid it. Then that's it. That's everything that this anonymous user stated with regards to their entry. So lots of good stuff to talk about, no? So let's talk about that here. For starters, we have an actual location. You know how some of these encounters don't have them, right? For whatever reason, people leave the cities or the towns or villages, wherever the location is, blank. Here, though, we have one. Silva, North Carolina. So if anyone knows more information on a local level, like what kind of experiences this is, or whether there's more information about similar type of encounters, please post them below. But this happened there because of the user doing that forestry program, and obviously they have to be out there in the forest training for it both day and night in order to be able to do so. But what about that entity? What is it? I can't think of anything. Nothing in terms of any of the past cryptids that I've talked about in the past, like maybe, no, not even, I was thinking about one other one, but no, not even close. Like this thing, whatever it was, perfectly mimics voices, and then obviously it moves in a gainly position. Like, in other words, like the user said, like they're just a newborn, barely trying to walk for the first time, and there's no way that I can't think of anything else that matches those type of characteristics. Plus the fact that this thing is a perfect, absolutely perfect predator of sorts. Like it can just stay outside of that window as it has for the previous nights. It heard those conversations and it did so in a perfect manner. In other words, it was absolutely not heard, not encountered. Nobody had any clue as to it being out there during that time period, all those previous nights. So it definitely is able to blend and camouflage very well to anything else outside. The first indication comes to it being a skinwalker, but I don't know. Like somebody again point that out to me. Silva, North Carolina. Is that a place for such things, especially out there in the forest? Who knows with regards to that? It could be a ghost, a spirit, something along those lines. I don't know either. Just so many things to point out. But again, this thing purposely mimicked that person's voice. It obviously knew that it heard that this person was hearing them say these things, and it did so not just once, but twice. And then whatever it was doing in terms of it moving around the cabin, it was also making those scratching sounds to further exemplify things. And to me, it read like it was a way, like there was no indication that it wanted to get in. Like if it could easily do so. But it just wanted to make those scratching sounds just to make sure that the person knew, with again a frightening effect, that it was out there. It knew that they knew it was out there, not just with the voice, not just with the footsteps, but now with the scratching sounds. And it wanted to savor that moment for who knows how long. And then it left. And then, of course, the user stated that it felt like they were still being watched for a certain time period afterward, at least to her specifically. But the fact that, again, they didn't really 100% certify this kind of makes it up and open out in the air. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff to talk about here. It was about the median height of a man, 5'7". Its walk is apparently very, very bad. Could it be a person, an actual human? There's always that possibility too. You hear about those stories every now and then of just people, some people living out there in the woods, nomads, just complete wildlife experience. They're out there, and if this is a sick person that just wanted to creep up on these people and then just stay out there and then be able to do something bad or try to cause some frightful experience, that could be a possibility, but I think that's too far out there even for me. I think that would take too much work and they would have been caught by now, especially when it comes to footsteps and other type of notifications of someone else being out there. But I'd love to hear what your comments are with regards to this very, very unique encounter. If anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, especially on the local side from Silva, North Carolina, then please let me know along those lines. That would be pretty frightful too. Talk about being a captive audience. You're out there for the certification program, and you know now that there's something out there, but there's not much you can do without sounding loony and then trying to quit at the same time. And so it's kind of like being stuck in a rock in a hard place. But again, any other info, let me know. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.